welcome to this week's episode of Perfect Recall, where we take a look back at the week in video game news, and obviously a fair amount has changed about the channel. We're going to get into that at the end of today's episode. I apologize for not having an episode last week. It was not due to not being able to film it. The entire thing was filmed. There were horrific audio issues throughout. It's an issue that is prevalent through what I've been doing lately, and I honestly don't know why. I've spent a fair amount of time trying to figure out what's wrong, and I just can't put my finger on it. So I do apologize that there was no show last week, but we're back at full strength this week. Got a fair amount of things to talk about. I do want to go over some of what I was talking about last week, just because it was a big enough story, and that was the Steam Deck. Valve announcing that they're moving into the handheld console market, essentially, you know, competing with the Switch. It's really the Switch's only competition in that market. One of the things I talked about is, you know, it kind of makes sense. You have PlayStation and you have Xbox. You have Switch and nothing else, because the Switch does find itself in kind of a weird spot. You know, it is a somewhat traditional console in the fact that you can hook it up to your television and play it with an external controller, but it has that hybrid mentality where you can take it on the go and play it as a handheld. I've never thought of the Switch as a competitor to the PlayStation and Xbox, and I don't think Nintendo does either. And in reality, the Steam Deck isn't even really competition for the Switch, but it's kind of the only thing that's going to be similar to it that people have an opportunity to buy on a mass-produced level. Of course, there's like knockoff Switch consoles you can get that run off Android and things like that, but this is, you know, this is the real deal. The big difference here with the Steam Deck is that it's essentially a small PC. You could run Windows on it if you wanted to. You could, as they said in an interview with IGN, Valve mentioned that essentially anything that you can install on a regular Windows PC, you could install on the Steam Deck. So for me, I don't care too much about having a portable computer on the go. It's not for me. I don't care. What I do care about is what hobbyists are going to do with this thing, what people are really going to be able to break apart when it gets shipped and into people's hands. I think there's going to be some incredible stuff with the DIY community, the homebrew community. I think people are going to tear that thing apart, re-engineer it, and just come up with some truly incredible things that you're gonna be able to do on it. I really think that it's going to be a huge boost to the emulation scene. I think that once the dock comes out and you can dock this to your television, I think just the sheer fact that, like, hey, I could put a bunch of arcade ROMs on this thing, connect either a Bluetooth or potentially wired arcade stick to this thing, have it on my television, essentially have like a home arcade without needing to build a cabinet and fuss around with all that stuff. That on its own, that's super cool. There's a really big community into building like small form factor computers that can do some crazy stuff, and a lot of them lately have been adding small screens to their setups and trying to make essentially like a beefed up Switch, and now Valve's doing it for you. That's going to be really, really big, and that's what's exciting to me about it. I couldn't care less about like playing Control on the bus. That doesn't really mean anything to me, but it does to a lot of people, and this is going to be an awesome product for those people. Like I said, I'm excited about the other end of it, the hardware end of it, the software end of it, of what you're going to be able to put onto this thing, and all of the world of possibilities that comes with that. So something to super keep an eye on. I'm not going to pick one up. I can't justify spending that kind of money on something like that right now. I want to see what happens when it comes out. For me, where I pick it up is like a year in, a year and a half in, after people have really started to make some super cool stuff for it. That's kind of where I come into the picture on it. But leave your thoughts down below about what you think of the Steam Deck. Is it for you? Did you pre-order one? Because at this point, pre-orders were open. Just let me know. Let's get the conversation going. Yeah, that kind of wraps up everything I want to talk about last week. Obviously, there were other stories that were going on, but that was kind of the big one that I wanted to get out of the way. So let's move right on. All right, before we get on to the news stories of the week, we got to talk about EA Play. That was kind of their, you know, showcase of upcoming titles, though I will say most of the show were games that are already existing, or, you know, games that are already released, as they showed a lot of Apex Legends stuff. I want to focus on kind of two things. The two things that jumped out at me. The Battlefield stuff, which was the debut of Battlefield Portal, and the Dead Space teaser. Let's get Dead Space out of the way because it was pretty short. It was very, very short, fully CGI cinematic trailer. Just letting you know that, like, hey, this exists, we're working on it, no release date. I would be surprised if it's even 2022. I would say minimum spring 2023 for that thing. It's cool that they're making it. It's still hard to define what it is. A lot of reports have been coming out saying that it's like a hybrid. It's not a remake. It's not just like, you know, what they did for Demon Souls last year. It's a mixture of things from Dead Space 1, 2, and 3 that they liked. They put it all together, and they're retelling the story with the characters, and it's just an amalgamation. Who knows what that is? For me personally with Dead Space, I played the first one that came out. There was a lot of hype about that game. It was kind of hard not to get interested in it. I don't think I finished it. It was fine. Horror games are just not for me. I typically don't play them. So I didn't play 2 or 3, but those games are beloved. I know so many people that love that series and are so excited about this. I was actually really hoping that my wife would get into it because she really loves horror games, and I was like, man, you gotta play Dead Space. It's so good. And she just couldn't get into it. But I brought this up to her like, hey, they're making a new one, and it's gonna be kind of like this like mixture of all the best parts of the 3, and now she's kind of like, okay, cool, I'm on board, I'll check it out when it comes out. So yeah, I think it's awesome that it's happening. It's not for me personally, but I'm very excited because there are people that are so passionate, not just on like the development side that want to work on that game, but also on the fan side that are just eagerly chomping at the bit waiting for it to come out. Moving on to Battlefield, which is what I'm super excited about. I cannot wait for Battlefield 2042 to come out. I thought the debut trailer at was the day before Summer Games Fest. I thought it was incredible. I love the shifting nature of the multiplayer maps, and then they come out with Battlefield Portal, which is insane. I mean, it's just insane. It's a mixture of 1942, Bad Company 2, Battlefield 3, I think, I can't remember, and then Battlefield 2042. So it's got a selection of multiplayer maps from all those games, and you can mix and match. So you can do 1942, you know, World War II soldiers against future soldiers. You can do crazy matches where it's like a tank against a bunch of like random robot things that they showed in the trailer. Like it's really just like up to you and your creativity for what you want to do with this thing. And that's awesome. My only question is, and I'm sure they'll explain this, hopefully, is like, how does it work? So if I create this custom game, does it just sit out there and people can search for it and play it? Like, how do they know what to search for to find it? Do I have to always be in that game for it to work? Do your custom games save? Like, kind of like the nitty-gritty, like those details, that's what I want to know. I was kind of hoping that after the presentation, they would have had some type of like press release or maybe like a separate video that's like, okay, let's break down like the mechanics of like, how do you actually do this? How is this stuff curated? How are you going to find it? How are you going to save it, etc., etc.? I'm sure that they will probably do that before the game comes out. But yeah, I am sold. I am really, really looking forward to that game. It's been a couple years since I played a competitive first-person shooter. The last one I was super into was Modern Warfare. I didn't play anything last year. I haven't played anything so far this year. So it's time. It's time for me to jump back into one, and Battlefield 2042 looks perfect. So really only 2 news stories to cover this week. One horrifying one and one not so horrifying one. So let's start with that one, and that's that Netflix has confirmed that it's expanding into video games as part of their service. Here's a quote from an article put up by Video Games Chronicle. Games will be included in members' Netflix subscriptions at no additional cost, the company said, and initially it'll be primarily, and they put that in quotations, focused on games for mobile devices. We view gaming as another new content category for us, similar to our expansion into original films, animation, and unscripted television, Netflix said in a letter to its shareholders. I was going to bring this up last week. Obviously, like I said, that video wasn't able to come out. I guess some of my concerns have been answered. So my main concern with this is that the infrastructure of internet in the United States, which is Netflix's biggest market, is not great. We still have so many areas of this country that do not have access to either A, internet at all, or B, satisfactory internet that will be able to stream games. Streaming a game is a totally different beast than streaming a video. Anybody that tried the early days of PlayStation Now can attest to that. With them focusing on mobile games, it's going to be a lot easier for them to dole out that content and for people to be able to interact with it. I can't imagine that the internet speed demands will be as high as if these were like AAA titles. It looks like they are focusing on making the games themselves. You know, most likely, I assume at some point they'll create a like Netflix games development studio, but they're probably going to outsource games or maybe find existing mobile games or something like that. It definitely isn't like, hey, you know, Game Pass is on this or something like that, you know. So I'm curious what they do with it. I like the fact that as of right now, it won't cost you anything extra. Unless the games are amazing, I can't imagine I'd be too interested in it. I don't really like mobile games all that much. I have very few games that I like to play on my phone. Solitaire and Angry Birds, like I still have the original Angry Birds downloaded on my phone, and I, just whatever reason, just never gotten sick of it. But I know some people live and die off mobile gaming due to, you know, commutes to work or whatever it may be. You know, there's a range of possibilities for why that is. So this is cool. Most people have Netflix. You know, a large majority of people have Netflix, or at least know somebody that has it, and they can bum a password off of it and get a login. So I'm honestly surprised at this. I think that this is a cautionary yet very smart way for them to get into it by going the route of mobile games instead of just being like, oh no, man, we just spent $3 billion to form a game studio and then nothing comes of it. Because look at what Google did with Stadia. You know, I think it's so attractive for a company that has all this money to just be like, hey, video games are easy. Let's just hire some people to make video games. Go get me an office space. And then they spend all this money and then nothing comes out of it, and it just is embarrassing. So yeah, it's inevitable that something like this was going to happen. It makes sense that it's Netflix doing it first. Yeah, I guess, you know, just wait and see. But I hope that they do something cool with it because, hey, getting it is an extra bonus without having to pay for it. That's always nice. Our final story this week is that Activision Blizzard has been sued over frat boy culture and harassment by the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. I'm going to be quoting an article over on Bloomberg. They're the publication that broke the news. This is by Maeve Alsop, who is listed as a legal reporter for them. I'm not going to quote too much, but I do have some highlights I want to get into. Please read her article. It's an important article to read. It's absolutely sickening what is going on and has gone on at Activision. So just to kind of give you some of the, I don't want to say highlights, these are lowlights because these people are scum. It says a 2-year investigation by the state agency found that the company discriminated against female employees in terms and conditions of employment, including compensation, assignment, promotion, and termination. The agency alleges male employees play video games during the workday while delegating responsibilities to female employees, engage in sexual banter, and joke openly about rape, among other things. Joking about rape is not something that you do, period, let alone in a professional work setting. The suit also points to a female Activision employee who took her own life while on a company trip with her male supervisor. The employee had been subjected to intense sexual harassment prior to her death, including having nude photos passed around at a company holiday party, the complaint says. This is terrifying that this happens in a company. And the sad thing is, it's not isolated to them. This happens at a lot of places, both in big companies and small companies. The reasons why, who knows? I guarantee you a big reason why it happens is because those in charge are allowing it to happen. If somebody really wanted it to stop, they could very well step in and stop, because you know what you have to do? You fire those people. Granted, they could just get a job somewhere else and continue to do it. But if somebody really, really wanted this to stop, they could get it to at least... You're never going to get harassment to stop because it's so indoctrinated into our culture. But you can at least send stern messages. And I don't mean a stern message like an email that goes out by an HR rep. I mean higher-ups and executives, presidents and vice presidents that are removed from their positions and then not replaced with people that did it at other jobs. I think a lot of what happens in tech companies, video game companies, more so than your traditional workplace, because your traditional workplace has a ton of racism, sexism, you name it, it's happening. But I think what is a little bit different about tech companies in general is typically it's a younger workforce. And it's not just a younger workforce on like the ground level, it's a younger workforce in terms of middle management, upper management, and in some cases, senior leadership, because you have people in their 20s that become tech billionaires and they have a company. These people have no experience with managing a team. They have no experience with working with people, how to treat somebody in a professional setting. They treat them like they would treat their friends. And the way you treat your friends is not how you should treat a subordinate, essentially. I've worked in places, granted nothing like this happened that I was aware of, but I've worked in places where you see issues and you can trace it back immediately to, oh, this person is in charge and they're 24 years old and their only job experience before this was working in a restaurant where they bust tables, and now they are in charge of a team of 60 and they don't know how to handle it. And then the people above them don't know how to handle it because they've never been in a position of power like that. And then it just continues on down the line. And that's how this stuff happens. And that's how this stuff perpetuates. There are horrifying people in this world, and too many of them are in positions of power, and they allow actions to happen like this. They encourage actions like this to happen, or they themselves are causing these actions to happen. And it's a shame because I've seen people react to this that just said, yeah, I'm not surprised. That happens where I work. That's happened to me. Like, that's awful. That should not be a normal thing. That should not be, like, an expected thing. Like, oh, yeah, I got this new job. I'm going to be harassed. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. Like, who wants to live like that? And that's just the way so many of our corporations are set up. If it's not because of the age and inexperience and immaturity of the people in charge, it's because the people that are in charge come from a time where society didn't push back at all against it. There was no speaking out. There was no social media. There was no real push to change things. It was just, we accepted that this is the way life is, and everybody just has to deal with it. And there's still so many holdovers from that time frame that they then groom people below them to think that that's okay, and then it just perpetuates the cycle, and you just can't get away from it. And you would hope that it's like, well, if I ever ran a company, I would never allow anything like that. And I'm sure there are people that are in that mindset that's like, oh man, if I ever was in charge, this would never happen. And then you get put in charge, and then the power rushes to your head, and the next thing you know, things get out of hand, and you're an active participant in it. I hope that this leads to some type of change at Activision. I'm sure it won't. Look who's in charge. Bobby Kotick is a piece of garbage. It sucks. You know, we think of video games as this happy thing in our lives, and nobody really wants to talk about, like, well, what did the people have to go through in order to put this game onto the shelf? How many people had to be harassed in order for this code to get written? It's just, you know, it's so much easier to just turn your head away from it and not worry about those things until it happens to you at a job that you're at. And thankfully, or you know, hopefully it never does. But the second it does, you know, most people, unfortunately, then don't put two and two together. Like, oh, I bet this is happening to other people. It may take a while for them to come to that realization. This country has so many problems, and I don't want to get political here, and I'm not going to, but this company has so many, or this country has so many problems that at this point people view it as a normal part of working at a company to be harassed. And I'll just leave it at that. Obviously, we have a lot to unpack at the end of this episode with what's going on with the channel. There's some big changes. Obviously, the name of the show is different. The name of the channel is different. So what exactly is going on with the channel? The name needed to change. Push Start was never going to last. I could not get it on YouTube. There's already a youtube.com/pushstart, so that was never going to happen. It's taken on Twitter, it's taken on Instagram, it's taken everywhere. So that wasn't going to happen. So I was like, oh, maybe I could do a variation on it. It wasn't going to work. It's just never, ever going to work. I needed to come up with a different name, and I needed to do things a little bit differently on this channel and have more of a plan for this channel instead of just, my plan was, okay, well, every week I do this weekly video and then just whatever else I have time for. And that is not the type of consistency that this channel needs, or that any channel needs on YouTube. So what exactly is changing? So this show is not changing, aside from the name, because it makes no sense to call it Push Start to Listen anymore, because the name of the channel has changed. This will still stay a news recap show. There will be no more Push Start videos, except for there is a new one coming out on Monday, and then Push Start is done. And instead, I will be focusing on the same kind of video, just not having it be focused on one type of thing. And what I mean by that is that mostly Push Start was focusing on arcade stuff and like my personal video game memories. Instead, it's going to be just focused on whatever interesting topic I have about older video games. So it can become a little bit more focused. Then I started a new series on the channel, which will be much more regular. And it's called Finally Getting Around to It, because I wanted more gameplay on this channel. I was like, what does this channel need? It needs less me talking about games and more me playing games. So, Finally Getting Around to It will be a weekly video where I play a game that either I have never played before or I haven't played since it came out. First one came out this past week. There'll be another one next week. I'm not quite sure what day they're going to come out on, but they're going to come out every week. And it just gives some consistency to the channel. There will be no more videos about toys and toy collecting. There will be no more videos about vinyl and record collecting. I still want to do stuff about toys. That will have to be a separate channel. YouTube does not like it when you branch out. You have to be about one thing. And so I had to pick what that one thing was. So hopefully that clears it up. I get that it's a little confusing. It makes sense in my head, at least. So what is coming up on the channel? So Monday will be technically the final episode of Push Start, though the series will continue with just a new name and just a little bit maybe wider range of topics. Finally Getting Around to It will still be a regular thing. Quick Hits will be done. Those videos got 0 views. Legitimately, the 2 Quick Hits videos that I came up with, they say that they have views. Those views came from me just checking on the video, having to open it for whatever reason to you know, I was showing it to somebody or whatever. They legitimately got 0 views from anybody that was not me. So those are just done. For whatever reason, it just didn't work. So that kind of content will get folded into the Finally Getting Around to It. So yeah, it's, you know, we're working the kinks out, you know, and I want to thank everybody that's sticking around for it. So yeah, what's going to come out of this change is a more focused channel, and a channel that I am more excited about. I was already excited to do this stuff. Like, I'm not burnt out. I don't feel like I was forcing myself to do anything, like nothing like that. I just needed to make some changes on my end to put out a better product, essentially, and a product that I can be a little bit more excited about, and that's what's happening. So yeah, check out the episode of Push Start on Monday. That's the second part of the series where I look back on the games of my childhood. It's wrapping up the Super Nintendo, so some fun games to talk about in that one. New episode of Finally Getting Around to It will be coming out next week. And then this show will be every Saturday morning. So yeah, once again, thanks for hanging out, and stick around because I think we got some cool stuff coming. I'll see you next week.